I walked into my own house and felt like a burglar. Everything was wrong, too clean, too perfect, like someone had been playing house while I was gone. Then my neighbor said 5 words that made my blood run cold. I heard screaming from inside. My mom swore she'd only been watering plants, but when I checked the hidden cameras I'd installed, I discovered she'd turned my home into her personal business headquarters. What she was doing there would make your skin crawl. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted most, hit that subscribe button now. Like this video if you believe actions have consequences, and comment below if you've ever caught family members crossing major boundaries. This story will make you want to check your own security cameras. Let's dive in. My name is Helen, and I've been a long-haul trucker for 8 years. When people hear that, they usually picture some tough woman who can handle anything. And maybe that's true on the road, but when it comes to family, I've always been the pushover. The one who says yes to everything, who gives people the benefit of the doubt even when they don't deserve it. Let me tell you what life looks like when you're hauling freight across the country. You spend 2, sometimes 3 weeks straight living in a cab that's smaller than most people's bathrooms. You shower at truck stops where the water pressure is weak, and you have to feed quarters into a machine just to get 5 minutes of lukewarm water. You eat gas station food and drink coffee that tastes like it was made with motor oil, but you need the caffeine to keep your eyes open during those endless stretches of highway. The loneliness hits you hardest at night. You're parked at some rest stop in the middle of nowhere, listening to the sounds of other trucks idling, knowing that tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all over again. But you do it because the money's good, and because you've got a house back home that needs paying for. That house was my sanctuary, a little 2-bedroom place I'd bought with my first year's earnings. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. White picket fence, small front yard, the kind of place where neighbors actually talk to each other. I'd worked my tail off to afford it, and every time I came home after weeks on the road, walking through that front door felt like taking my first real breath. The arrangement with my mom, Patricia, seemed perfect at first. She lived about 20 minutes away, and when I started taking longer routes, she offered to check on the place, water my plants, bring in the mail, maybe run the vacuum once in a while. I gave her a spare key and thought I was lucky to have such a caring mother. Patricia had always been what you'd call a social butterfly. She loved hosting gatherings, organizing events, being the center of attention. After my dad passed 5 years ago, she'd thrown herself into community activities, book clubs, charity events, neighborhood committees. I figured keeping an eye on my place gave her something useful to do. This particular trip had been brutal. 3 weeks hauling automotive parts from Detroit to Phoenix and back, with stops in Texas and Oklahoma. The heat was unbearable, my air conditioning had been acting up, and I'd dealt with 2 flat tires and a jackknife truck that shut down I-40 for 6 hours. By the time I finally pulled into my driveway, I was beyond exhausted. That's when my neighbor Roy approached me. Roy was the kind of guy who knew everyone's business on our street, not in a nosy way, but because he genuinely cared about the neighborhood. He was outside watering his roses when I started unloading my gear. "Helen, hey," he called out, walking over with that hesitant look people get when they have to tell you something you don't want to hear. "Everything is all right over at your place?" I stopped dragging my duffel bag and looked at him. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" Roy glanced at my house, then back at me. "Well, it's just... I've been hearing some strange sounds coming from inside. Loud voices, music, sometimes what sounded like..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Like someone was in distress." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Roy, I haven't been home in 3 weeks. You must be thinking of someone else's house." But Roy shook his head slowly. "No, Helen, it was definitely your place. And I've seen people going in and out at night, people I don't recognize." That cold feeling started in my stomach and spread outward. What kind of people? Different folks each time. Men, women, usually carrying bags or coolers. They'd park down the street and walk up. And Helen... Roy looked genuinely troubled. The sounds I heard weren't like a normal party. They were... intense. I thanked Roy and headed inside, telling myself he was mistaken. But the moment I stepped through my front door, I knew something was wrong. The air smelled different. Not bad, exactly, but not like my house. It smelled like cleaning products and something else I couldn't identify. Everything was immaculate. And I mean immaculate in a way that my house had never been, even when I spent all weekend cleaning. The hardwood floors were polished to a mirror shine, my coffee table gleamed like it was brand new, even my windows sparkled like they'd been professionally cleaned. But it was my bedroom that really threw me off. The bed was made with military precision, corners tucked so tight you could bounce a quarter off them. My throw pillows were arranged in a perfect pattern I'd never used. My dresser top was organized with my perfume bottles lined up like soldiers. I stood there staring at my own bedroom, feeling like an intruder. This wasn't how I'd left things. I'm not a slob, but I'm also not Martha Stewart. I leave dishes in the sink sometimes, and my bed usually just gets the covers pulled up. This level of perfection was unsettling. That's when I called my mom. "Oh, sweetie." Patricia's voice was bright and cheerful, maybe a little too cheerful. "You're back. How was the road?" "Mom, did you clean my house?" A pause. Then a laugh that sounded forced. "Well, I might have tidied up a bit. You know how I am. I can't stand seeing a mess. I hope you don't mind." "It's spotless, Mom. Like professionally cleaned spotless." "Oh, you're exaggerating. I just ran the vacuum and wiped down a few surfaces." I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at Roy's house. "Mom, Roy said he heard voices coming from my place. Loud voices. Did you have people over?" Another pause, longer this time. "Don't be ridiculous, Helen. Why would I have people over at your house? Really, you should talk to Roy about his hearing." But something in her tone bothered me. Patricia had always been a terrible liar. Her voice got higher when she was being dishonest, and right now she sounded like she'd inhaled helium. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Roy's words, people in distress. What did that even mean? And why would strangers be going in and out of my house at night? By morning, I'd made a decision that went against every instinct I'd been raised with. I was going to spy on my own mother. I drove to an electronics store and bought 4 small security cameras, the kind that connect to your phone and record everything to the cloud. I spent the afternoon installing them in strategic locations, one in the living room behind a picture frame, one in the kitchen tucked behind my coffee maker, one in the hallway near the front door, and one in my bedroom, hidden behind some books on my dresser. The whole time, I felt sick to my stomach. What kind of daughter spies on her own mother? But Roy's concerned face kept flashing in my mind, along with that strange smell in my house and the unnaturally perfect cleanliness. I left the next day, for what I'd told Patricia was a short run to Nashville, just 3 days. But instead of leaving town, I checked into a motel about 15 minutes away and monitored the camera feeds from my phone. The first day, nothing happened. I started to feel foolish, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. The second day, at around 7 p.m., I watched my mother let herself into my house. She moved through the rooms efficiently, checking things, straightening items that were already straight. It looked innocent enough, just a concerned mom making sure everything was perfect for her daughter's return. But then, on the third night, everything changed. At 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app and watched my front door open. But it wasn't just my mother who walked in. It was my mother followed by 4 people I'd never seen before, 2 men and 2 women, all carrying bags and what looked like folding chairs. My heart started pounding as I watched strangers file into my living room. One of the men immediately started rearranging my furniture, pushing my couch against the wall and setting up the folding chairs in a circle. One of the women unpacked candles from her bag and began placing them around the room. The other woman set up what looked like a small table with bottles and various objects I couldn't identify from the camera angle. Within 20 minutes, my living room had been transformed into something I didn't recognize. The lights were dimmed, candles were flickering, and these strangers were sitting in a circle in my house like they owned the place. And then things got weird. Really weird. I watched as one of the women began speaking in what sounded like a different language, gesturing dramatically with her hands. The others joined in, their voices rising and falling in some kind of chant. The camera's audio wasn't perfect, but I could hear enough to know this wasn't any kind of normal gathering. Then came the sounds Roy had mentioned, voices raised not in anger, but in what I can only describe as intense emotional release. People crying out, sometimes shouting, sometimes making sounds that raised the hair on my arms. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking. What the hell was my mother involved in? And why was she using my house for it? My phone rang 20 minutes later. The caller ID showed it was the local police. "Ma'am, this is Officer Martinez with the city police. We've received noise complaints about your address. Are you currently hosting an event at your residence? No, I said, my voice barely steady. I'm not home. Only my mother has a key. We're going to need to check on the situation. Can you contact whoever might be at your property? Absolutely, I said. I'll call her right now. But before I could call Patricia, my phone rang. It was her. Helen, honey, she said, and her voice was tight with controlled panic. I need you to do me a favor. The police are here, and there's been a misunderstanding. Can you just tell them that you knew about tonight's gathering, that you gave permission? The words hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't explaining. She was asking me to lie to the police to cover for whatever she'd been doing in my house. What gathering, Mom? What's going on? It's nothing serious, sweetie. Just some friends having a spiritual meeting. You know how these neighbors can be. They hear voices and assume the worst. Spiritual meeting? Mom, what are you talking about? But before she could answer, I heard my father's voice in the background. My father, who I'd thought knew nothing about this. Patricia, just put me on the phone. A moment later, Dad's calm, steady voice came through the line. Helen, your mother's been helping some people with their personal problems. It's all perfectly legal, and it helps pay for her medications. Just tell the police you are aware. The bottom dropped out of my world. Both of my parents were involved. This wasn't some mistake or misunderstanding. This was a business they'd been running out of my house, using my absence and my trust to make money off whatever weird services they were providing. No, I said quietly. What? Dad's voice sharpened. No, I will not lie to the police. No, I did not give permission, and no, this stops right now. The silence on the other end was deafening. Helen, don't be unreasonable, Dad started, his voice taking on that tone he'd used when I was a child and he expected immediate obedience. But I wasn't a child anymore. I was a grown woman who owned her own house, who'd worked her ass off to build a life, who'd trusted her parents with the keys to her sanctuary and discovered they'd been violating that trust in the worst possible way. You have until tomorrow morning to return my key and remove whatever you've been storing in my house, I said. If you ever enter my property again without permission, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Helen Marie, my mother's voice came back on the line, using my full name like she was scolding a 5-year-old. I hung up. The next morning, I found my spare key in an envelope taped to my front door. No note, no apology, just the key. I spent that day going through my house room by room, checking for anything that didn't belong. In my bedroom closet, I found a box of candles, crystals, and what looked like tarot cards. In my basement, there were folding chairs stacked against the wall, and a small table I'd never seen before. Everything got loaded into garbage bags and left on the curb. It's been 6 months since that night, and my parents and I haven't spoken. Some people might say I'm being too harsh, that family is family and I should forgive and forget. But here's what I learned. Trust isn't something you owe someone just because you share DNA. Respect isn't automatic just because someone gave birth to you. My house feels like mine again. When I come home from long hauls now, the silence doesn't feel strange anymore. It feels peaceful. Because it's my silence, in my space, earned with my work. If this story made you think about your own boundaries with family, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about people who finally stood up for themselves. Drop a comment and tell me, what's the biggest boundary you've ever had to set with family? And remember, your home should be your sanctuary, not someone else's business opportunity. Until next time, keep those boundaries strong.